The Grand Aurelia Chapel smelled of white roses and old money. Crystal chandeliers threw light across silk tablecloths and polished marble floors. 400 guests sat in perfect rows, their jewelry catching the afternoon sun that streamed through stained glass windows. Everything was beautiful. Everything was expensive. Everything was wrong. Jessica stood at the altar in a lace gown she had not chosen. The sleeves were too tight. The bodice was too heavy. Malcolm had selected every detail, from the pearl buttons down the back to the cathedral-length veil that pooled at her feet like melted wax. She had nodded when the designer asked if she loved it. Malcolm's hand had been on her shoulder then, warm and weighty, and she had learned long ago what happened when she disagreed. The priest's voice droned through scripture. Malcolm's grip tightened around her fingers, his thumb pressing into her knuckles the way it always did when he wanted her attention. She gave it. He smiled down at her, handsome and sharp, his gray eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "Smile, darling," he whispered. "People are watching." Jessica's lips curved. Her face obeyed. Her heart sat cold and quiet in her chest. In the second row, her mother dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief. Her younger sister Lena sat beside her, holding Noah on her lap. Noah, 4 years old with dark hair and darker eyes, swung his legs impatiently. He did not understand why his mother was standing so far away, dressed like a princess in a book he did not like. Jessica wanted to wave at him. Malcolm had told her not to. The priest reached the vows. Jessica's stomach turned to stone. "If anyone here knows of any reason why this man and this woman should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace." Silence. The kind of silence that fills expensive churches and expensive weddings, where no one dares interrupt the performance. And then the doors flew open. The sound hit like thunder. Every guest turned. The organist's hands froze above the keys. Jessica felt the air change before she saw him, felt the shift in pressure, the electric crackle of something long dead suddenly breathing again. A tall Korean man, in a black silk shirt, walked down the aisle. 4 silent men followed him, their suits dark, their faces expressionless. But Jessica only saw the man in front, Donald Lee. The name slammed through her ribs. 5 years collapsed into a single heartbeat. She knew the shape of his shoulders, the angle of his jaw, the way he moved through space like he belonged everywhere he stood. But his face was harder now, colder. The soft mechanic, who had once laughed at her terrible singing behind her mother's bakery, was gone. In his place stood a man, carved from stone and shadow. Before we continue with this story, make sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who loves a good romance, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. Now, let's get back to Jessica and Donald. His eyes found hers and did not let go. The guests whispered. Someone gasped. Malcolm's hand clamped down on Jessica's wrist. Donald stopped 10 feet from the altar. He did not look at the priest. He did not look at Malcolm. He looked only at Jessica, and his gaze burned through the lace and the pearls and the carefully constructed lie of this day. "You will not marry him." His voice was low and even, the kind of voice that did not need volume to command a room. The words landed like stones dropped into still water. Malcolm released Jessica's wrist and turned to face the intruder. His smile did not falter. Malcolm Voss had built an empire on never faltering. "Donald Lee," Malcolm said smoothly, "I've heard interesting things about your recent career change. Security, please escort these men out." None of the guards moved. Donald's expression did not change. "Your security works for me now. The hotel surveillance, the police files, the insurance reports you thought disappeared. All of it." He tilted his head slightly. "I bought them 2 nights ago." A ripple of unease passed through the guests. Malcolm's smile tightened at the corners. "This is a private ceremony," Malcolm said. Whatever grudge you're carrying, it has no place here. Grudge? Donald took one step closer. His presence was overwhelming, a gravity that pulled every eye toward him. I'm not here for a grudge, Voss. I'm here to stop a transaction. Jessica flinched. The word cut deeper than any shout. Donald's gaze shifted to her, and for one fractured moment, something flickered beneath the cold surface. Pain, long buried and carefully hidden, but there. Is that what this is, Jessica? A transaction? Her throat closed. The man who had once held her face between his grease-stained hands and promised to love her forever was standing in her wedding asking if she had sold herself. The cruelty of it stole her voice. Before she could answer, a small figure broke from the second row. Noah ran down the aisle, his polished shoes slipping on the marble. He crashed into Jessica's gown and wrapped his arms around her legs, crying because the loud man with the scary voice had frightened him. Jessica bent instantly, gathering her son against her veil. Noah, it's okay, baby, it's okay. Stay with Aunt Lena. But Donald had gone completely still. He stared at the boy, at the dark eyes so like his own, at the stubborn chin, at the small brown birthmark below Noah's left ear, identical to the one Donald had touched 1,000 times in bathroom mirrors. The world tilted. That's enough, Malcolm announced, his composure cracking. He grabbed Jessica's arm. The ceremony will continue privately. This disruption is over. Donald's hand came down on Malcolm's wrist. The motion was calm, almost gentle, but the warning beneath it was absolute. Take your hand off her. She is not my wife yet, Malcolm hissed. She is not your anything. Donald looked at Jessica. The cold mask slipped, just slightly, and beneath it she saw the ghost of the man she had loved. No, Donald said quietly, not unless she chooses me. The chapel held its breath. Malcolm's face twisted. Jessica stood at the center of it all, her son clinging to her dress, her past colliding with her present. And for the first time in 5 years, something that felt like hope cracked through the ice around her heart. Donald Lee had come back from the dead, and he was not leaving without answers. 5 years earlier, Donald Lee was nobody important to Jessica's family. He was only the quiet mechanic who repaired vans behind her mother's bakery, a narrow shop called Golden Crust that sat on the corner of a working-class neighborhood where the air always smelled of yeast and sugar. Donald worked in a cramped garage 2 doors down, a place with peeling paint and a sign that read, Chan's Auto Repair. He was not the owner. He was not the manager. He was just the man who showed up every morning at 6 and left every evening covered in grease. Jessica first noticed him during a summer heat wave when the bakery's delivery van broke down 3 times in 1 week. Donald fixed it each time, refusing payment beyond a box of fresh pastries. He was polite but quiet, his English careful and slightly accented, his smile rare but genuine. She learned his story slowly. His mother had moved them from Seoul when Donald was 12, fleeing a family he never discussed. She had died when Donald was 19, leaving him alone in a city that did not care. He had no father to speak of, no siblings, no safety net. He worked because work was all he had. Their friendship began with small kindnesses. Donald came inside after closing to help Jessica stack chairs and wipe tables. She brought him coffee laced with cinnamon because she noticed he never drank it plain. They talked about nothing and everything. Music he missed from home. Songs she loved but could not sing. The way rain sounded on the bakery awning, steady and safe. One night, a thunderstorm trapped them inside together. The power flickered. Jessica lit candles from the storage closet and sang an old love song, badly on purpose, just to see him laugh. And he did laugh. A warm, surprised sound that filled the dark bakery and made her chest ache with something she refused to name. After that, they were inseparable. Donald fixed her mother's old oven without being asked. He rebuilt the creaking display case. He repaired the roof when it leaked and never mentioned the cost. Jessica's mother remained polite but distant. Donald was not the kind of man she imagined for her daughter. He had no degree, no savings, no future that could be measured on paper. But Jessica did not care about measurements. She loved the way Donald listened, really listened, as if her words mattered more than the air he breathed. She loved his hands, rough and capable, gentle when they touched her face. She loved that he never tried to impress anyone, never performed, never pretended to be more than he was. On a rainy evening beneath the bakery awning, 6 months after that first storm, Donald gave her a cheap silver ring. "It's nothing fancy," he said, his voice unsteady. "I'll replace it one day, with something worthy of you." Jessica kissed him before he could finish apologizing. "I don't want something worthy of me. I want you." He promised to marry her when he could afford a real ring. She promised to wait. They made plans in whispers, dreams too fragile to speak loudly. A small apartment, a simple wedding, a life built on flour and motor oil, and love that did not need permission. Then he vanished. No goodbye, no explanation, no final kiss beneath the awning. One morning, his apartment was empty. His phone was dead. His boss at the garage claimed he had quit without notice. Jessica searched everywhere: hospitals, bus stations, the places they had walked together. Nothing. 2 weeks later, she received an envelope with no return address. Inside was the silver necklace she had given him on his birthday, the chain tangled like a strangled memory, and a note, 7 words on plain white paper: "You were never worth the trouble." The sentence broke something in Jessica's chest that never healed right. She stopped eating for days, stopped speaking, stopped believing that love was anything but a wound waiting to happen. And then her family's disaster began. Her father's warehouse caught fire 1 month later, destroying inventory worth hundreds of thousands. Insurance refused to pay, citing suspicious circumstances. Debts surfaced like bodies from deep water. Then her sister Lena collapsed at school, and the doctors found a heart condition requiring surgery that cost more than the family had ever owned. Malcolm Voss appeared during the darkest week, like a man sent by divine intervention. He was wealthy, polished, and generous. He paid Lena's hospital bills. He settled the warehouse debts. He bought the bakery property and moved Jessica's mother into a gated estate. Everyone called him a savior. Jessica called him the man who had saved her family when she could not. She did not know then that Malcolm had engineered every disaster. She did not know that on the night Donald disappeared, Malcolm had visited her family home and borrowed her phone to make a call. She did not know that Donald, bleeding on a pavement in Seoul, had received a message from her number, a message telling him her family was right. He was too poor for her. He should never come back. Jessica knew none of this. She only knew that the man she loved had thrown her away like garbage, and the man who replaced him wore kindness like a mask over something she could not yet see. The night Donald disappeared, he did not leave willingly. 3 men grabbed him outside his apartment. They wore civilian clothes and moved without hesitation, the way men move when they have done this before. Donald fought, but a blow to his ribs stole his breath, and a bag over his head stole his vision. They drove him to the edge of the city, to a warehouse district where no one would hear. The beating was methodical, not random violence. Punishment. "You're leaving tonight," one of them said, his voice calm and bored. "You're going back to Seoul. You're never coming back. You're never contacting her again. Understand?" Donald, bleeding from his mouth, asked why. "Because she doesn't want you. She told us to make you leave." He did not believe it, could not believe it. But then the man held up a phone and played a voice message. Jessica's voice, unmistakable, saying words that shredded everything Donald had believed about the last year of his life. "My family was right. You are too poor for me. Do not come back." The message from her number arrived an hour later, text instead of voice, crueler and more final. Donald read it in a daze while strangers bought him a plane ticket and drove him to the airport. He did not resist. What was there to resist? The woman he loved had erased him. Soul swallowed him whole. He arrived with nothing, no money, no contacts, no plan. For 2 weeks, he slept in a bus station and ate from convenience store dumpsters. The city of his birth was foreign to him, its streets unfamiliar, its language too fast for his rusty Korean. Then his grandfather found him. Kim Sung-ho was a legend in certain circles and a ghost in others. The Black Crane Syndicate had been his creation. Built from gambling dens and protection rackets in the aftermath of war, expanded over decades into shipping, construction, and politics. He was 78 years old, dying of liver cancer and looking for an heir. Donald's mother had fled the family when Donald was a child, escaping the violence and control. She had never spoken of her father. Donald had never known the name Kim Sung-ho meant anything, but his grandfather had kept track of him across oceans, waiting for the right moment. "You have my blood," the old man said from his hospital bed, his eyes sharp despite his failing body. "You have my anger. I see it in you. Let me teach you how to use it." Donald refused at first. He was not a criminal. He fixed cars. He stacked chairs in bakeries. He loved a woman who had thrown him away. But grief is a forge. It heats and shapes and hardens. He said yes. The next 5 years were a transformation so complete that the man who emerged barely remembered the man who had entered. Donald learned Korean properly, learned the language of business and threat and negotiation. He learned to read ledgers and balance sheets, to trace money through shell companies and offshore accounts. He learned to stand in rooms full of dangerous men and make them look away first. His body changed too. He trained in gyms that did not ask questions, learned to fight and to endure. The soft mechanic's build gave way to lean muscle and controlled tension. His face lost its warmth, replaced by watchfulness and reserve. When his grandfather died, Donald inherited the syndicate. He was 31 years old, and he commanded an organization that stretched across shipping yards, private security firms, nightclubs, and political connections. He was feared and respected in equal measure. But the bitterness never faded. It calcified into something harder, a core of ice at the center of his chest. Jessica's betrayal had taught him the only lesson that mattered. Love was a weakness, and weakness got you beaten on a warehouse floor while strangers played recordings of the voice you trusted most. He did not plan to return. Seoul was his world now, and revenge was a distraction he could not afford. Then his intelligence network flagged a name, Malcolm Voss, owner of the Voss Meridian Group, expanding into shipping contracts that overlapped with syndicate territories, marrying a woman named Jessica Chen in 3 weeks at the Grand Aurelia Chapel. Donald read the report 3 times. He told himself he felt nothing. The past was dead. The woman was a stranger. But his hands trembled when he set the paper down, and that night he did not sleep. He arranged travel. He gathered information. He told his lieutenants he was investigating a business rival. And he arrived in the city of his greatest love and greatest loss with a single cold intention: to destroy the man who was marrying the woman Donald had never stopped hating. He attended the rehearsal dinner in secret, watching from a hotel balcony as guests arrived in expensive cars. He saw Jessica for the first time in 5 years. She was thinner, quieter. Her smile did not reach her eyes. Then he saw Malcolm grip her wrist, hard enough to make her flinch, and something in Donald's chest cracked open. The wedding was in 3 days. Donald began to plan. The chapel had become a pressure cooker. Guests shifted in their seats, torn between fear and fascination. The most expensive wedding of the season had just been interrupted by a man who moved like a predator and spoke like a judge. Malcolm's smile remained fixed, but his eyes had gone flat and dangerous. "This is absurd," Malcolm said, his voice carrying across the silent room. "An unstable criminal with a vendetta has disrupted our ceremony. I apologize to our guests. Please remain calm while security removes him." No one moved. Donald's 4 men stood like statues at the chapel entrance. The hotel's security guards, 3 of them positioned near the altar, remained exactly where they were. One of them glanced at Donald and gave an almost imperceptible nod. "I told you," Donald said calmly. "Your security works for me now. The surveillance archives, the police files, the insurance reports from 5 years ago, all purchased, all reviewed." He paused. "All very interesting." Jessica's voice finally broke free, rough and trembling. "Why are you here, Donald? You disappeared. You sent me that note. You don't get to walk into my wedding like this." Donald's gaze snapped to her. "I sent you a note, 7 words." Her voice cracked. "You were never worth the trouble. I still have it. I kept it like a scar." The chapel fell into a different kind of silence. Donald's expression shifted, something flickering behind the cold surface. "I received a message too," he said slowly. "From your phone. The night I was forced out of the city. It said your family was right. I was too poor. I should never come back." Jessica stared at him. "I never sent that message." "I know." 2 words that changed everything. Donald had suspected from the moment he saw her flinch at Malcolm's touch. Now he was certain. Malcolm's composure cracked. "Enough of this theater. Jessica, we're leaving. The ceremony will continue at the estate." He reached for her arm. Before Jessica could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. Noah had been watching the tall stranger with the scary voice, and something about him had quieted the boy's fear. He pulled away from Aunt Lena and ran to his mother again, this time planting himself between Jessica and Donald. "You're loud," Noah said, looking up at Donald. "Why are you loud?" Donald looked down at the boy. Really looked. The dark eyes, the stubborn chin, the birthmark below the left ear, small and brown, exactly where Donald's own birthmark sat. He had seen it every day of his life in the mirror. The world tilted beneath him. "Noah," Jessica said quickly, pulling the boy behind her. "Stay with Mama." "Noah," Donald repeated. The name came out rough, almost broken. Malcolm saw the recognition dawn on Donald's face and moved fast. "Lena, take Noah outside, now." Lena hesitated, looking at her sister. Jessica nodded, her face pale. Lena scooped up Noah, despite his protests, and carried him toward the side exit. Noah called for his mother, his voice high and frightened, until the door closed behind them. Donald watched the boy leave, his hands, steady through years of negotiation and threat, trembled once before he stilled them. "How old is he?" Donald asked. "That's none of your concern," Malcolm snapped. "I wasn't asking you." Jessica met Donald's eyes. Something passed between them, a current of unspoken understanding. She was terrified and confused, and still half convinced this man had destroyed her, but she was also looking at his face and seeing her son's face looking back. "He's 4, she said quietly. 4 years old. The math was simple. The truth was undeniable. Donald turned to Malcolm, and the cold mask returned, but this time it covered something volcanic. "We're going to discuss this, privately, now." "I don't take orders from criminals," Malcolm said. "You will take this one." Donald signaled to one of his men, who produced a tablet. "Because if you don't, every screen in this chapel will display footage of your business dealings. The warehouse fire, the insurance fraud, the payments to the men who attacked me." Malcolm went very still. "Your choice," Donald said. "A private conversation or a public exposure." The guests had begun murmuring again, phones appearing in hands, social media feeds updating in real time. Malcolm calculated rapidly, his eyes moving between Donald, the guests, and Jessica. "We'll discuss this at the estate," Malcolm said finally. "Tomorrow, reasonably, without threats." "Today," Donald said. "Now, at the bakery." The bakery. The word hung in the air like incense. Jessica felt her heart clench. Golden Crust had been closed for 2 years, the building still owned by Malcolm, but left empty, a shell of what it had been. "Why there?" she asked. "Because that's where the truth started," Donald said, "and that's where it ends." He turned and walked back down the aisle, his men falling into formation behind him. At the chapel doors, he paused and looked back at Jessica. "Tomorrow morning, 10 o'clock, bring Noah." Then he was gone, leaving the chapel in chaos. Guests stood and began talking all at once. Malcolm grabbed Jessica's arm and pulled her toward the side door, his grip tight enough to bruise. The priest stood frozen at the altar, his Bible still open to the wedding vows. This was not finished. It had barely begun. Malcolm's estate sat on 15 acres of manicured land, a Georgian mansion with white columns and black shutters, and a gate that required a security code. Jessica had lived here for 2 years. She still felt like a guest who had overstayed her welcome. The drive from the chapel passed in silence. Malcolm's driver kept his eyes on the road. Malcolm sat beside Jessica, his posture rigid, his breathing controlled. He did not speak until they were inside the house, the heavy front door closed behind them, the staff dismissed to other wings. Then the mask came off. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" Jessica stood in the center of the grand foyer, still wearing her wedding dress, still carrying the scent of roses and disaster. "I didn't do anything." Donald appeared. "I didn't invite him." "You humiliated me." Malcolm's voice was soft, which made it worse. He never shouted. Shouting was for people without power. 400 guests, business associates, political connections, and my bride stands at the altar while a gangster makes demands. "He's not a gangster," Jessica said automatically, then stopped. She did not know what Donald was anymore. Malcolm stepped closer. "Let me explain your situation clearly. Your mother lives in a house I own. Your sister receives medical care I fund. Your son attends a school I selected and pay for. The bakery property, the warehouse settlement, the debts your father left behind, all of it exists because I allow it to exist." Jessica's throat tightened. "You said those were gifts." "Nothing is a gift." He adjusted his cufflink, a tiny motion of perfect control. "Everything is an investment, and I protect my investments. If Donald Lee thinks he can interfere with my investments, he will learn otherwise." "What do you mean?" "I mean that a woman connected to organized crime may not be considered a fit mother. I mean that custody arrangements can be revisited. I mean that your family's security can disappear as easily as it arrived." He smiled, cold and precise. "Do you understand?" Jessica understood perfectly. Every kindness had been a chain. Every rescue had been a trap. She had known it for years, felt it in her bones, but hearing it spoken aloud was different. It made her want to scream, or break something, or run until her legs gave out. She did none of those things. She had learned to survive by not reacting. "I understand," she said. "Good. Tomorrow you will meet with Donald Lee, and you will tell him to leave, permanently. If you don't, the consequences will extend to everyone you love." He left her standing in the foyer, the train of her wedding dress pooling on the marble floor like a frozen waterfall. That night, Jessica lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Noah slept in the room beside hers, his breathing soft through the baby monitor. She had checked on him 3 times since returning home, touching his hair, tracing the birthmark below his ear. Donald's birthmark, she had known from the moment Noah was born. The doctor had placed him on her chest, red and crying and perfect, and she had seen the small brown mark and felt her heart crack in half. Donald's son, Donald's eyes, Donald's stubborn chin. She had never told anyone, not her mother, who would have used the information as leverage, not Malcolm, who would have used it as a weapon. The secret had been hers alone, carried through sleepless nights and lonely years. Now Donald knew, or suspected, and everything was about to change. Across the city, in a hotel suite that occupied an entire floor, Donald sat in darkness. His men had retreated to their rooms. The tablet on the table in front of him displayed Noah's birth certificate, obtained through channels that did not ask questions. Father, blank, date of birth, March 14th, place of birth, St. Catherine's Hospital, 9 months after Donald had been forced out of the country. He pulled up hospital records next. Blood type, birth weight, a note about a minor heart murmur that resolved itself. And then the document that made his hands stop moving. A genetic screening report, routine for newborns, listing paternal markers that matched Donald's own medical file from a physical he had taken 3 years ago in Seoul, his son. The word felt foreign and enormous, a continent he had never visited. He had spent 5 years building walls around himself, becoming someone who could not be hurt because he did not care about anything. And now, a 4-year-old boy, with his eyes and his chin and his birthmark, had walked through those walls like they were made of paper. Donald had come back for revenge. He had planned to destroy Malcolm Voss, humiliate Jessica, and return to Seoul satisfied. Those plans were ashes now. He called his lead lieutenant, a quiet man named Park, who had been with him since the early days in Seoul. I need everything on Malcolm Voss. Not just the shipping deals. Everything. The warehouse fire, the medical bills, the insurance fraud, and find the men who attacked me 5 years ago. I want names and locations. Yes, sir. Park paused. And the woman? Donald stared at the birth certificate on the screen. The woman is protected. No one touches her. No one touches the child. Make that clear to everyone. Yes, sir. The call ended. Donald sat in the dark until dawn crept through the curtains, and for the first time in 5 years, he allowed himself to hope. The bakery sat on a quiet street corner, its windows boarded, its sign faded. Golden Crust had been closed for 2 years, ever since Malcolm had bought the property and decided it was not worth maintaining. The awning where Donald had once promised to marry Jessica still hung above the entrance, tattered now, flapping in the morning breeze. Jessica arrived at 10 o'clock exactly. She came alone. Noah was with her sister, safe at the estate. She had told Malcolm she would handle the meeting. She had not told him what she intended to say. Donald was already there, standing in the alley where he used to park his motorcycle. He wore a dark jacket over a white shirt. No tie, no visible weapons. But the men waiting in the black sedan across the street left no doubt about who he was now. "The door is locked," Jessica said. "Malcolm has the keys. I have others." Donald produced a key from his pocket. "I had a copy made years ago. Kept it." The door swung open. The smell hit her first, stale and dusty, but underneath it, the ghost of yeast and cinnamon. The display cases were empty. The chairs were stacked against the wall, exactly where Donald had left them on his last night, 5 years ago. Jessica walked to the center of the room and stopped. "Why here?" "Because I need you to remember who I was." Donald's voice was quieter than it had been at the chapel. "Not who I became, not what you saw yesterday. The man who loved you in this room. I remember that man." Her voice caught. "I also remember the note he sent. 7 words that ruined me. I didn't send it." Donald pulled a folded paper from his jacket. "This is the message I received, the night I disappeared." She took it. The paper was worn, creased from years of folding and unfolding. The words were typed, not handwritten, but the sender was listed as her number. My family was right. You are too poor for me. Do not come back. I never sent this, Jessica whispered. I know, but I believed it for 5 years. He took the paper back, his fingers brushing hers. The men who attacked me played a voice recording, your voice, saying something similar. I thought it was real. Malcolm was at our house that night. Jessica's mind was racing, pieces connecting. He came to discuss business with my father. I let him borrow my phone because his battery was dead. He said he needed to call his office. Did he leave the room with it? She closed her eyes. Yes, for about 20 minutes. The silence that followed was heavy with understanding. Donald had spent weeks digging through Malcolm's records. He knew about the voice synthesis software Malcolm's company had developed for marketing purposes. He knew about the assistant who had been paid to send the message from Jessica's phone. You received my necklace, Donald said, with a note. 7 words. You were never worth the trouble. The memory still cut. I kept it. I kept all of it. The necklace, the note, the ring you gave me. I couldn't throw them away even when I hated you. I didn't send that either. I know. She met his eyes. I think I've known since you walked into the chapel. You were angry, but you weren't cruel. The Donald I loved wasn't cruel. And the man standing in front of me isn't either. Something in Donald's face shifted. The cold mask cracked, and beneath it she saw exhaustion and grief and a desperate, fragile hope he had not allowed himself to feel in years. Jessica, he said her name like a prayer. Noah is my son. Yes. You didn't tell me. How could I? You were gone. I didn't know where you were. I didn't know if you were alive. And then Malcolm was there, and he was paying for everything, and I was trapped before I even understood what was happening. Donald stepped closer. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I left. I believed the lie. I spent 5 years becoming someone who could never be hurt again, instead of trusting what I knew about you. What did you know about me? That you loved me. His voice broke on the words. That you didn't care about money. That you sang love songs badly and laughed when you forgot the words. That you were the only person who ever saw me, really saw me, and didn't look away. Tears slipped down Jessica's cheeks. She did not wipe them away. Malcolm burned down my father's warehouse, she said. He admitted it last night. Not directly, but he didn't need to. He created the disaster and then played the hero. He paid for Lena's surgery because he knew it would chain me to him forever. I have proof of all of it. The payments, the voice recordings, the men who attacked me. Donald's jaw tightened. He's going to prison. Malcolm has lawyers, connections. He'll fight. He'll lose. Donald's voice was iron. I've spent 5 years learning how to make men like Malcolm lose. But that's not why I asked you here. Why then? Because I need you to know that I'm not here to claim you, or to demand Noah, or to take anything from you. He held her gaze. I came back for revenge, and I'm still going to get it. But you are not part of that. You never were. Jessica stood in the dusty bakery, surrounded by the ghosts of cinnamon and laughter, and promises made under rain, and made a choice. I want to help, she said. I want to take him down. For my father, for my sister, for Noah, for us. For us, Donald repeated. There might be an us, someday. But first, I need to be free, really free. Not traded from one man's protection to another's. Donald nodded slowly. Then we do this together. We expose him, and when it's over, you decide what comes next. Okay. Okay. The word hung between them like a truce and a promise. Outside, the morning sun broke through the clouds, and somewhere across the city, Malcolm Voss was preparing for a wedding he still believed he could control. He was wrong about everything. The footage arrived on Malcolm's phone at noon. One of his private investigators had captured Jessica entering the bakery. Donald followed 3 minutes later. They remained inside for nearly an hour. When Jessica emerged, her eyes were red, but her posture was straighter than Malcolm had seen in years. He watched the footage 3 times. His expression did not change. The maid who brought his lunch retreated quickly, recognizing the stillness in him, the dangerous calm before storms. Malcolm made a series of calls. The first was to his lawyer, instructing him to prepare custody documentation regarding Noah Chen, citing concerns about the mother's association with organized crime figures. The second was to the estate's head of security, issuing new protocols. No visitors, no departures without approval, all gates locked at all times. The third was to Jessica's mother. Margaret, he said smoothly, we need to discuss your daughter's recent behavior. I'm concerned about her judgment and about Noah's safety. Margaret Chen arrived at the estate within the hour. She was a small woman with tired eyes and a spine that had bent under decades of worry. Malcolm received her in the conservatory, surrounded by orchids he had imported from Singapore, beauty that belonged to him. I've been patient, Malcolm said. When the wedding was interrupted, I maintained composure. When Jessica met with that criminal privately this morning, I remained understanding. But my patience has limits. Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. Jessica has always been emotional. She doesn't think before she acts. Emotional is one thing. Endangering Noah is another. Donald Lee is a dangerous man, Margaret. If Jessica continues this association, I'll have no choice but to seek legal guardianship of Noah. For his protection. The threat landed exactly as intended. Margaret's face went pale. Noah is my grandson. Jessica would never put him in danger. She already has. She brought him to a wedding where a Mafia boss confronted her. She left him at the estate this morning to meet with that same man privately. Malcolm shook his head sadly. I've tried to help your family, Margaret. I've paid debts, covered medical bills, provided security, but I can't protect people who refuse to be protected. What do you want me to do? Convince Jessica to cooperate. The private wedding will take place tomorrow evening, here at the estate. Small ceremony, family only, no disruptions. If she goes through with it, I'll forget this unfortunate business with Donald Lee. He paused. If she doesn't, I'll be forced to take steps I've been trying to avoid. Margaret nodded slowly, her resistance crumbling. I'll talk to her. Good. Malcolm smiled. I knew I could count on you. That evening, Jessica returned to the estate to find the gates locked and her mother waiting in the foyer. The confrontation was quiet, but devastating. Mom, he burned down Dad's warehouse. He paid men to attack Donald. He's been controlling us for years. Margaret's voice was weary. I know you believe that. Donald has clearly filled your head with conspiracies, but Malcolm has been nothing but generous. Generous? Jessica's voice rose. He threatened to take Noah away if I don't marry him. He admitted everything last night. He's scared, Jessica. He loves you, and he's scared of losing you. He doesn't love me. He owns me. Or he thinks he does. Jessica grabbed her mother's hands. Please, I need you to trust me. Just this once. Margaret pulled away. I trusted your father, and he left us with nothing. I trusted you when you said Donald was different, and he abandoned you. Malcolm is the only one who has actually been there. Real help, real security. I won't throw that away because of a man who disappeared for 5 years. The words hit like stones. Jessica watched her mother walk away and felt the last thread of family support snap. She called Donald from a burner phone he had given her at the bakery. Malcolm moved the wedding. Tomorrow evening, he's threatening to take Noah. Then we move faster. Donald's voice was steady, grounding. I have the evidence. I have witnesses. The men who attacked me are in custody and talking. By tomorrow night, Malcolm won't be threatening anyone. What about Noah? He's at the estate. The gates are locked. I'll handle Noah. Trust me. The line went dead. Jessica stood in her bedroom, surrounded by the luxury that had been her cage, and made a decision. She would walk into Malcolm's private wedding exactly as he wanted. She would wear the dress and stand at the altar and let him believe he had won. But this time, she would not be silent. This time, she would be the storm. The estate chapel was smaller than the Grand Aurelia, but no less opulent. Stained glass windows depicted scenes of pastoral serenity. White flowers lined the aisle. 20 guests sat in polished wooden pews, hand-selected by Malcolm for their loyalty and silence. Jessica walked down the aisle at 6 o'clock precisely. She wore a simpler dress than the first one, ivory silk with minimal lace, chosen again by Malcolm. Her mother sat in the front row, eyes downcast. Her sister Lena held Noah on her lap, the boy dressed in a tiny suit, his expression confused. He did not understand why they were doing this again. Malcolm waited at the altar in a black tuxedo, his smile perfectly calibrated. He looked like a man who had already won. When Jessica reached him, he took her hand and whispered, "I'm glad you came to your senses." Jessica said nothing. Her heart pounded against her ribs, but her face was calm. She had spoken to Donald 20 minutes ago. Everything was in place. The officiant began. The ceremony moved through the standard passages. Jessica's responses were mechanical, her voice flat. Malcolm squeezed her hand whenever she hesitated, a silent reminder of the consequences of disobedience. They reached the vows. "If anyone here knows of any reason why this man and this woman should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now or forever hold your peace." The chapel doors opened. Donald Lee walked in holding Noah's hand. The boy must have slipped away from Lena during the ceremony. He had found Donald outside the chapel, exactly as planned, and Donald had led him inside with gentle reassurance. Now Noah stood beside his father, their resemblance unmistakable, their matching birthmarks visible to anyone close enough to see. Malcolm's composure shattered. "How did you get past the gate?" "Your security chief retired this morning," Donald said. "Generous severance package. His replacement works for me." He gestured behind him, where Park and 3 other men stood flanking 2 federal investigators and a uniformed police officer. "So do they." "Malcolm Voss, you're under arrest for insurance fraud, arson, assault, conspiracy, and extortion." The guests erupted in whispers. Malcolm laughed, a short, ugly sound. "This is absurd. I have lawyers who will dismantle whatever fabricated evidence you've produced." "The evidence isn't fabricated." Donald's voice carried across the chapel. "We have bank records showing payments to the men who set the warehouse fire. We have the voice synthesis software you used to fake Jessica's message. We have testimony from the men who attacked me, naming you as the one who hired them. And we have your assistant, who is currently providing a full confession to federal investigators." Malcolm's face went gray. The screens on the chapel walls flickered to life. The same trick Donald had prepared for the first wedding. Footage played. Malcolm meeting with known arsonists. Bank transfers routed through false charities. Recordings of Malcolm ordering his assistant to send the breakup message from Jessica's phone. The guests watched in stunned silence. Margaret Chen covered her mouth with both hands. "Jessica," Malcolm said, turning to her, "tell them this is a lie. Tell them you love me." Jessica looked at him. This man who had burned her father's business, who had driven away the love of her life, who had trapped her family in a cage of debt and called it generosity. She looked at him and felt nothing but the hollow ache of years stolen. "I don't love you," she said. "I never loved you. Every kindness you showed my family was a chain you wrapped around my throat." She removed his diamond ring and placed it on the altar. The gesture was simple, final, and absolute. "You didn't save my family, Malcolm. You destroyed it and then sold yourself as the cure. You paid for my sister's surgery and called it generosity, but it was a leash. You bought the bakery and called it protection, but it was a cage. Her voice rose, steady and clear. You are not my rescuer. You are not my husband. You are nothing to me. Malcolm lunged for her. Donald moved faster, stepping between them with a speed honed by years of training. His hand caught Malcolm's wrist and twisted, forcing the other man to his knees. The police officers rushed forward, handcuffs clicking into place. You will not touch her, Donald said. You will never touch her again. Malcolm was dragged from the chapel, his composure gone, his empire crumbling around him. The guests sat frozen, unsure whether to follow or stay. Jessica's mother approached her daughter with shaking hands. Jessica, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the fire, about the messages. He told me you were confused, that Donald was dangerous. I thought I was protecting you. Jessica looked at her mother and saw the exhaustion, the fear, the years of making wrong choices for right reasons. The anger was still there, but so was something else. I know, Mom. We'll talk about it. But not today. Today was for something else. The investigation lasted 3 months. Malcolm Voss was charged with 14 counts of fraud, arson, conspiracy, assault, and extortion. His lawyers fought hard, but the evidence was overwhelming. The men who had attacked Donald testified in exchange for reduced sentences. Malcolm's assistant provided documentation of every order, every payment, every cover-up, the warehouse fire, the medical bills that had been inflated to increase Jessica's debt, the voice recordings, the threats. It all came out. Malcolm was sentenced to 22 years in federal prison. The Voss Meridian Group dissolved within weeks, its assets seized, its reputation destroyed. Jessica's family received restitution for the warehouse fire, enough to rebuild the bakery and pay off the remaining medical debts. Donald returned to Seoul briefly to settle syndicate affairs. He transferred operational control to Park, his most trusted lieutenant, and established a legitimate business division that would operate independently of the organization's darker activities. The Black Crane Syndicate would continue, but Donald Lee would no longer lead it. I can't be that man anymore, he told Jessica during one of their late-night phone calls. I became him to survive, but Noah deserves better. You deserve better. Who do you want to be? She asked. I want to be the man who fixed your mother's oven, the man who stacked chairs after closing, the man who loved you before any of this happened. He's still in there, Jessica said. I saw him when you knelt to introduce yourself to Noah. Donald had done that the day after Malcolm's arrest. He had knelt in front of his son, introduced himself honestly, and asked permission to be part of Noah's life. Noah had studied him with those dark, serious eyes, and then asked if Donald knew how to build Lego spaceships. I do, Donald had said. Okay, Noah had said. You can stay. It was that simple, and that profound. The bakery reopened 6 months after Malcolm's sentencing. Golden Crust rose from its ashes with new ovens, new displays, and a fresh coat of paint. Jessica ran the business with her sister, their relationship rebuilt on honesty and shared purpose. Their mother helped with the books, quieter than before, humbler, trying to earn back the trust she had nearly lost. 1 year after the private wedding that had become Malcolm's undoing, Jessica stood in the bakery courtyard under morning light. She wore a simple white dress, one she had chosen herself, comfortable and unpretentious. Fresh bread cooled on racks near the kitchen door. Jasmine climbed the courtyard walls, filling the air with sweetness. Noah ran between the guests, laughing, his small suit already stained with flour. Donald's dark suit was simpler than anything he had worn as syndicate head, and his smile was no longer rare. It came easily now, warm and surprised, exactly the way it had on that rainy night in the bakery, when Jessica had sung love songs badly just to hear him laugh. The officiant was a friend, not a priest, someone who knew their story and understood what this moment meant. The guests were family and close friends, people who loved them without conditions or agendas. Donald took Jessica's hands. His grip was gentle, steady, certain. "I made you a promise once," he said. "Under an awning in the rain. I told you I would replace that cheap ring with something worthy of you. I told you I didn't want something worthy of me," Jessica said. "I wanted you. You have me, all of me, the mechanic and the mafia boss, and the man trying to be better." He slid a ring onto her finger, silver with a small diamond, beautiful and understated. "This is not a chain, it's not a debt, it's a choice. Every day, for the rest of our lives, I choose you." Jessica felt tears slip down her cheeks and did not wipe them away. "I spent years being chosen by men who wanted to own me. Malcolm chose me like a piece of property. Even my family chose my future for me, thinking they were protecting me." She squeezed his hands. "But you're the only one who ever chose me like I was a person, not a prize, not a transaction, a person who could say no, a person who could leave. You chose me, and then you let me choose you back. And that's why I'm here. Not because I owe you, because I love you." Noah tugged at Donald's jacket. "Are you married now? Can we have cake?" The guests laughed. Donald scooped up his son and balanced him on one hip. "Almost, little man. We need the official part first." "Fine," Noah sighed dramatically. "But cake is better." The officiant pronounced them married. Donald kissed Jessica in the morning light, surrounded by jasmine and fresh bread and the laughter of their son. No threats, no debts, no chandeliers or forced vows or masks worn for audiences. Just a promise chosen freely. Later, when the cake had been eaten and the guests had gone home and Noah was asleep in the back room, Donald and Jessica stood together in the courtyard where it had all ended and begun again. "I used to dream about this," Jessica said, "when you were gone. I used to imagine you walking through that door and everything going back to the way it was." "It can't go back," Donald said. "We're not the same people." "No, we're not." She leaned against his shoulder. "But maybe we're better ones, stronger ones. Maybe we had to lose everything to understand what mattered." Donald wrapped his arm around her. "You mattered. You always mattered. I just forgot how to believe it." The evening settled around them. The bakery would open tomorrow. There would be bread to bake, and a son to raise, and a life to build from the rubble of everything that had been destroyed. It would not be easy. Some wounds healed slowly. Some trusts needed time. But they had time now. Real time. Time that belonged to them. And when Donald Lee lifted his hand this time, it was not to stop a wedding, but to receive the woman who had finally chosen her own life. And that's the story of Jessica and Donald. If you enjoyed this journey from heartbreak to happily ever after, please drop a like, share it with a friend who needs a good cry today, and subscribe to the channel. We post new stories every week, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.